Breaker 19 Villains, you got your ears on. I'm your host, Tony. Welcome to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. It's May 18th. This is episode number 14. This week on the podcast in the pre-trip, we're going to talk about personal conveyance and 1984. No, not the year, not the Van Halen album, the book by George Orwell. In the money line this week, we're going to talk about truck parking. And I had the opportunity this week to have a really great conversation with a British truck driver, Matt, who's our guest for the week. Don't forget to hang around after the interview for the post trip. Let's get this rig rolling. If you're not driving, it's a great time to like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends.
10-4 drivers, welcome to the Channel 19 Experience Trucker Podcast. This is where the real stories roll, straight from the blacktop.
Paper breaker 19, can I get a radio check? Pretty quiet out here on Channel 19. Well, there's a plain white rapper taking pictures at the state line. Hit the jake brake quick, we ain't paying no fines. The driver swing into the interstate, body shop south at exit 5. Building trucking ain't the same as it was. We're the last of our kind.
At the Mid-America Truck Show, I had the fortune to meet up with Mike Barber, founder of Truckers Wealth. Both of us have a passion for understanding the uniqueness of truckers and sharing our knowledge wherever we can. Mike has over 20 years of dedicated experience serving the trucking industry. Truckers Wealth has created a specialized financial hub where truckers can receive expert advice and tailored solutions to build wealth, minimize taxes, and secure lifetime income for themselves and their families. Truckers Wealth provides personal strategies to help you achieve financial freedom on your terms. Check out his website, truckers-wealth.com, and look forward to seeing him on the program here soon. Grab that safety vest and let's do our pre-trip. So first up on the pre-trip, let's talk personal conveyance. Talk about jumping straight into the deep end of the pool. I don't plan to solve it today, but I'm really interested in sharing a little bit of my thoughts, getting y'all's thoughts, and let's talk this thing through together. The CVSA has been doing some research and they've got some data, all thanks to our wonderful friend, the good old ELD. And they've got some ideas on what to do. I'm not going to read them all here because this is just a primer for further discussion, like I mentioned, because this is really important to us. They've screwed this up long enough. It's been goofy going on 6 years since ELDs were mandated, they being the government and the government agencies responsible for this fund, the USDOT, the FMCSA, and of course the CVSA has been a participant in this as they try to figure out how they're going to enforce the regulations that come back through the regulatory processes. And since the current language is so messy as to render it very difficult for the CVSA to enforce anything consistently, back with paper logs, we manage the mess of trucking creatively. With our pens and our loose leaf logs, we smoothed out this pile of crap that is the supply chain and that gets shoved into the truckers' laps, and especially its lack of caring at all about what this mess does to truckers' lives, to truckers' time, to truckers' profitability. We just found a way to figure it out with a little bit of imagination and a three-ring binder. But then in strolls ELDs and software and computer programming, and these things all need more clearly defined, rigid rules. You can't program maybes and what ifs as easily as you can the black and white driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour. So a lot of people who didn't really know what goes on in trucking got their hands on their pens and their paper, and they cooked up a mess of regulations. And really, all the leftover bits, the stuff that didn't fit nicely into something easy to describe, all got bundled up and punted into things like personal conveyance and a few other goofy government speak areas of the ELD regulations. Now, quick note, One of my jobs in technology was I was the director of compliance products for Trimble Transportation, aka PeopleNet, that was ultimately acquired by Trimble along the way, which meant my team was working on ELDs, along with fuel tax and some other smaller compliance related items, but mainly ELDs, US ELDs, Canadian ELDs, all things, hours of service, essentially all the time. And I know what you're thinking, right? How did a 90s outlaw trucker find himself in the position of director of compliance for an ELD company? And at that time, managing what was, if not the largest, one of the largest ELD vendors in the country, their compliance team. This guy who keeps telling stories about his scofflaw days and his general lack, I mean, at best, lack of compliance mindset, at worst, maybe outright disdain for compliance, is now working with the government to try to figure out how to code ELDs. It's an interesting story. I'll go into that another day. We'll get to that story as I kind of work my way through the progression of my career, strung through the various episodes, but we'll get there. But what I gathered in these conversations that I was participant in with the government, that they didn't really know what to do with these exceptions. They were struggling with it as much as we were as at programming it, right? And some of it was just understanding it, trying to figure out what to do about it, knowing that you solve it one way and it creates a different problem, right? I mean, there's a lot of this mess that there's no easy way to just wrap a nice, clean rule around it and go, there, that solves it. That'll work. We're a big country. We got a lot of stuff going on here. We got a lot of different ways of going about it. We got businesses and trucking companies and truck drivers trying to do it in the most efficient way possible. That's what the machine of capitalism tries to produce, efficiency. And then we've got the whole regulatory perspective of how do we keep this from devolving into just outright chaos. Fair enough. That's their job. We've got our job. But the reality was is they were really struggling with what to do about it. And pick whoever you want to use as your voice of the industry, the voice of the customer, the voice of the truck driver. There were limitations in what everybody understood. And we all know this just because you ask ATA what their opinion is, they're going to go out to their group and we know which names they're going to come back with their opinions on. And if you pick any other stakeholder group, you're going to get a perspective. It's not going to be all encompassing, but that's their job to figure that out and sort that out and not just try to jam rules that don't make any sense on other parts of the industry just because that's the easy thing to do and it's air quotes solves the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. That's what we know, right? So we've got personal conveyance is kind of ended up in this collect all. Well, we don't know what to do about certain things, so let's just shove it into these goofy buckets like personal conveyance and sort it out later. So that's what happened. And I mean, it created problems of its own. As we know, the wording of the regulation is vague. Go on Facebook, fire off a question of, is this a valid use of personal conveyance? You're going to get different answers. My job was to work with the carriers to understand their perspective on what the regulations actually meant and how they would like the software to present the various options to the drivers in compliance with, on the flip side, the government's perspective on what they actually were meaning. And it was wildly different. Like you could literally get on a phone call with a Crete carrier, with a Werner, with a Heartland, with a Walmart, and get wildly different interpretations from their safety departments on what they think the software should do in relation to the verbiage in the regulation. So that's the big challenge here, which is we got a bunch of opinions and we've got badly worded at best regulations. And now we're seeing another perspective kind of get brought up in an article that just came out this week. And I'll share the link out so you can read it if you haven't seen it already. But basically, this CVSA jumped into the mix and said, look, like we don't have a prayer in hell of enforcing personal conveyance the way it's written, the way it's being used. This thing needs to be clarified. Of course, the challenge with that is this is their perspective from a, hey, how do we make this easy for us to monitor, to check, to write out citations, and also for them, their big challenge is how do we be consistent about it? They try their best to be consistent. They jump through extraordinary hoops as an organization trying to have some level of consistency in how the federal rules are being enforced all across this country through a variety of different agencies who are tasked with getting their training from CVSA and enforcing these regulations. They put an extraordinary amount. I don't want to shortchange the effort that they put in doing that. They were a great group of people to work with, incredible amount of knowledge about the rules and regulations and some of the realities of some of those, especially when it came to like equipment and other things that they knew very well. The challenge, I think, for them and everybody in this industry is understanding the operational realities of trucking and how that applies. And that's where we see it really come to bear here with something like personal conveyance, because this is where all the crap, all the goofiness of trucking winds up. All the stuff that didn't go right during the day, shippers, receivers, traffic, weather, all that stuff ends up squeezing down into a driver also trying to manage living their life, being profitable as a business, trying to balance some semblance of sleep, home time, family life, along with trying to do a job the best they can, as profitable as they can. So now we've got CVSA looking and publishing basically their suggestions to the regulatory organizations saying, this is what we think should happen in order to make personal conveyance consistently enforceable. Kind of my opening position on this, my opening salvo, my first shot fired is, to me, once again, they're going about it the wrong way. If you think about what's the problem to solve, ultimately the problem to solve is how do we make the roads as safe as possible? And the perspective here that it's kind of focused in on is, well, if we could close down some of these loopholes in personal conveyance, we can make the roads safer. And to me, my opening perspective is I think there's bigger fish to fry. And once again, I understand why it happens this way. The organization that is tasked with enforcing the regulations. So they're going to have an enforcement perspective on how to solve this problem. But to me, they're going about this the wrong way. And they're basically trying to solve the problem from the wrong end. We all know trucking is very unpredictable, and they're trying to solve for the unpredictability. They're trying to put rigid boundaries and predictability on the collection of unpredictable things. And they're trying to solve it from an enforcement perspective, and then using computer software to try to solve it. And by all of this, they're trying to make something very rigid that by nature is breaking out of all the other rigidity in their laws and the software. But let's talk about the causes of the unpredictability. Why it's so hard to put nice, clean boundaries around it. We've got shippers, we've got receivers, we've got traffic, we've got parking problems. And then there's even less predictable parts of the equation, like weather and human beings. My thought is maybe we should be thinking about how to make the right things less rigid. How about we look at how do we solve the safety problem by where we know the problems are lying? And maybe they got better data and maybe they can back it up. But it seems to me most truckers and people in the trucking industry can look around and like when we see crashes and we see the news stories that result from the crashes, it's not a surprise what we see. We've been saying it for years. Nobody wanted to listen. Nobody wanted to enforce it. We have rules on the books to enforce it. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. We've got companies that we know exist out there that basically totally fudge the ELDs. They create dummy drivers. They wipe off violations. Unless somebody shows me actual data that tells me that, yep, look at all these crashes that were a result of somebody erroneously using personal conveyance that led up to the crash. I think by and large, the majority of people using personal conveyance are doing it the same way we use paper logs to stretch the boundary a little bit on occasion for an appropriate outcome. And those people are all good actors, good truckers, safe truckers in this business. So why are we trying to corral in the safer part of the business who, for the most part, tries their darndest to stay within the realm of safe and legal and make it even more difficult for them? The reality is it's very likely that they're going to create, if these recommendations were to be baked into some update to the regulation and results in changes to the software that make it more rigid, the reality is we're going to have massive unintended consequences. Go read the list. I'm going to share out the link. Go read it and react for yourself. But a trucking person, a person who's either been behind the wheel or been in operations at trucking companies, you are going to immediately see the problems that they're going to create. The problem is they don't know those problems. At least they don't know it enough to say maybe that's not the right regulation. And in my opinion, there's not enough truckers' voice in these conversations. So that's why I want to hear what you think. I'm going to post the link, like I said, on what their CVSA's thoughts were. When you're done rolling your eyes and when you're done chuckling and you're past the immediate reactions of what a bunch of goofballs, do they even know how far off base they are on some of these things? Think about what might really work and let's talk about it. Write me, call me. We can record it or not. I've got some ideas. I'm sure you do too. But let's think this through and let's see if we can maybe put forth a set of ideas and share them up and see if we can't move the needle a centimeter or two or more with a dose of reality. But really, my opening position is stop chasing our tails looking for how do we squeeze the majority of the good actors into a solution when you could probably solve the real problem with diligence on the laws that are already on the books. The software companies can come thank me later if we make a difference here and they don't have to program some of this stuff that's going to be impossible. And guess what? We're a pretty sharp bunch and we got a lot of time on our hands to think about how to figure out how to get around some of their stupid ideas in this software. So we'll find a way. Don't worry. And then we'll be back at this again. I've got some ideas. I'm sure you've got some ideas too, especially after you read it if you haven't read it already. With the diversity in trucking, there's going to be people bringing up problems with the way it's written by the CVSA that some of the rest of us have never even thought of because it never applied to us. We didn't think about it that way. We'd never been in that situation. But when they get brought up, us trucking folks are going to recognize the problems those situations create for others. And also, if you see someone else anywhere, Facebook, social media, YouTube, a video, somebody who lays out some better ideas, share those with me too. I mean, I'm only as good as what I can find myself or what I think of myself unless somebody else shares it with me. So share that stuff over. I'm going to line up some guests. I'd like to do some conversations with y'all. Hopefully some of you are interested in maybe recording your thoughts on either the CVSA or personal conveyance in general. And I'm going to talk to a variety of people and see how they're handling it. I hadn't thought about it when I was talking with UK truck drivers, but I want to get some other people's perspective on what are you guys doing? I mean, I think there's some pretty universal truths about truck drivers that say like, yeah, just because I'm out of hours, I'm 30 minutes from home. Like I'm not sitting here for 9 hours or 20 hours or whatever it's going to take for me to get hours back. Like I'm going home. That's just the reality of it. Regulations be damned, ELD or digital tacky be damned. I'm going to see my family. The heck with this. Before they go and make anything worse, the good thing is the wheels of government move relatively slow, so don't expect any changes soon. But if we can inject ourselves into the conversation, aggregate some of our collective wisdom, share it with them, let's do that. All right, on to topic number 2 for the pre-trip. I'm going to start off by calling it the Trucker's Book Corner. We'll find a better name. So if you have suggestions, send them in, please do. One of my favorite pastimes is reading. Always has been. It was one of my favorite things about being a truck driver, honestly, especially in the 90s when we didn't have a lot of other things to occupy our time, like smartphones. Reading was one of the best parts of trucking, whether that was physical books, then audiobooks on CD, cassette tape before that. I had some of those except they got kind of bulky because you can't get a whole lot of time on them. So lots of cassette tapes, CDs, of course, and then CDs mostly on my Discman. I was rolling with the Sony Discman or 3 because you need backups because those things, they were not truck proofed for sure. And then using a cassette tape adapter to string that thing into the truck radio. Eventually, I had a 6-disc changer, but that sounded better in theory than it worked out in practice because you got to change the discs if you're going to roll for 10 hours straight. 6 CDs isn't going to cut it. So the Discman was kind of more practical and convenient. And then, of course, getting an iPod definitely bought me back a bunch of space in my truck when I got an iPod and could get some of the books and the books on CD out of there. And then, but also just from a weight standpoint. So I probably gained 500 pounds back on what I could haul once I got my iPod. But I loved all the time that I got to spend reading and listening to books while driving, at shippers, at receivers. A lot of the times, if a shipper or receiver was running behind and they said, it's going to be a couple hours, like, great. I'll see you in a couple hours because I got 80 pages to go in this book and I'm chomping at the bit to get after it. Or I needed a nap. I was one of those guys who always had a pretty nonchalant attitude most days towards any delay. Take your time. I got things to do. But in our first installment of this segment, it happens to not be a trucking book. It's a book called Julia. And I'm only a little ways into it so far, so no spoilers here. But it's kind of got built in spoilers, anyways. Julia is a book about a different perspective on the book written back in 1949 by George Orwell called 1984. 10 days ago, today's May 18th, and 10 days ago, May 8th, the world and most enthusiastically Europe celebrated VE Day, and it happened to be the 80th anniversary of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. They made the agreement on May 7th, and the armistice was to begin at 2300 local time in Germany, or I guess in France, where they signed the treaty. But at 2300 on May 8th would be the cessation of hostilities between Germany and the rest of Europe, Russia, all of them. Now, technically, the VE Day is May 9th for Russia because the time zone difference, right? 2300 in France is a few hours later over in Russia, in Moscow. So May 9th for them, May 8th for Europe and us. But anyway, it got me thinking, and I happen to be reading the book Julia, and it's tied to 1984, the book written by George Orwell. George Orwell was British. Like I said, he published the book in 1949, and the book 1984 is a futuristic look at the world. And of course, in 1949, 1984 being 35 years out into the future. Lots of books were written at that time about the future. Lots of people of Orwell's age who had just survived World War II, they had lots of thoughts about the future. And while the immediate relief of the end of the Second World War, remember, a lot of people had lived through both or experienced both in different ways at different stages of their life. But a lot of the books that were written at that time were not very optimistic. They were pretty gloomy. And even though there was optimism and excitement and enthusiasm or relief about being done with that war, there was still a war going on with the world and Japan and in the Pacific. And also the realities of the world didn't lead themselves to everybody feeling all that enthusiastic about what our prospects were going forward. The world was still a very conflict-ridden place, even though we had stopped shooting at one another for a while in one part of the world. So a lot of the books, like 1984 at that time, talking about the future, thinking about what the next cycle was going to look like for humanity and society in general, they were kind of gloomy. And I've read this book, 1984, somewhere between 10 and 20 times between reading the physical book and listening to the audiobook while driving. I love the book. I love the story. I love the lessons. It's very deep and layered and beautifully written. But my first time reading this book was in the mid 90s. And I've been reading that book 10 to 20 times all the way up until last year was the last time I read it. And my thoughts about it have changed a lot over the years in that 20 to 30-year range of reading the book. Mid 1990s, you're not that far behind 1984. So what he was talking about, and of course, it didn't look exactly like what Orwell had forecasted in this fictional book. But the interesting thing to me is seeing how my thoughts have changed about the book over the years and also how the world has evolved because 1995 looked a lot different than 2025. And there's a lot of things that didn't play out how we expected, even from that little 30-year window, building on top of the 30 to 40 years before that Orwell was looking at things. But it's interesting to me, while maybe some of the details are not right, the sentiment or thoughts that he imagined are playing out in many ways. And so, of course, he didn't have a way to know how technology would evolve 40 years later, let alone 80 years later. We see that in a lot of science fiction where it's almost comical what they predicted we might be doing 40, 50, 100 years later. And some of it we've surpassed monumentally, and others were not even close. And that's one thing I find interesting about just science fiction in general, which is how does technology play out? To what ends? And how far off base was it? And why might they have saw things evolving the way they did? And maybe why did we deviate as technology or as people to kind of diverge from what they thought back then? So, an interesting thing, and I'm trying not to do any spoilers here and spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it, either of the books, either 1984 or Julia. But one thing in the book he talks about that is a theme that's shared across both, and it won't spoil anything, is in 1984, Orwell talks about a thing called a versificator machine. And the whole purpose of the versificator machine, and back then it was a physical machine because they didn't have really a great concept of what computers and things like that could potentially be. So in his futuristic state, it was a mechanical device that would basically randomly combine words and spit out stories. It would create a set of characters, a plot, an ending, and it would just randomly pick things and spit out basically crappy books that would serve the purpose for the government to distract the masses with cheap, crappy entertainment. Now, in the 90s and early 2000s, when I was reading this book for the first time, the things that I related that to were things like TV talk shows, Phil Donahue, Morton Downey Jr., Arsenio Hall, which then later years, 5, 10 years later, became Oprah and Jerry Springer and Ricky Lake and so on. Basically, a format that people were literally throwing any topic they could come up with on the bright side, on the dark side, on the deviant side, on the criminal side, just randomly throwing topics out and seeing what worked to distract people in various ways. And then you move 20 years further down the line from the early 2000s to now, and you see AI becoming essentially Orwell's versificator. Now, the physical machine is turned into software, artificial intelligence, algorithms, and you see the evidence of that all over the place, whether it's AI generated news media, AI generated social media, whether that's completely manufactured, air quotes, people on social media, or comments, or stories, or content. The new age versificator AI is doing the same thing that while Orwell couldn't understand how it might manifest in the future with a great deal of accuracy, he could understand the value of a mechanism that randomly spewed out nonsense to distract people from what was really going on. And to me, that's very interesting, the concept of what he did. And it's amazing what it's capable of doing. If I wanted to, and I've toyed around with some of it just to see what would happen because I'm curious. But like I could make this whole podcast entirely with AI in a matter of minutes with ChatGPT. I could have picked these very same topics, or I could have asked it to go find 3 topics that were hot topic items in trucking today and spit me out a podcast template. And then I could tell it specifically, go research and find me 17 minutes worth of talking points around trucking and 1984, the novel. And it would spit it out. And then it would ask you, would you like me to use an AI voice and make this an audio? Sure, knock yourself out. I would like it to have a deeper voice, more like Sam Elliott. And you could literally build the whole podcast with the AI. It's just amazing how on point directionally he understood what a government's mindset might be for tools to control the masses in ways that he had just witnessed Hitler, Chamberlain, Churchill, Stalin, FDR in the United States, and all the media reaction. Like, if you had a machine that could spit out things to like, man, I wish they would just get distracted and stop paying attention so we could do something over here that we'd rather not tell them we're doing. He could see the power of tools like that, even if he couldn't see how it would be manifested. So, ridiculously on point with his understanding of the intent of technology. And there's a lot more of that in the book, which is part of the reason why it's a classic. So, getting back to the point, 1984 was written mostly from the perspective of the main character, a man, Winston Smith. He was a low level government worker whose job was to basically rewrite the news. Something the government would decide, hey, well, we just got our chocolate production results in, and it's actually we only made, and I'm just making stuff up, but we only made 100 tons of chocolate last quarter. And last time we told everybody we were going to make 150 tons of chocolate. So this is like a 33% reduction in productivity. So wouldn't it be nice if we could just go back and say, you know what, actually, we predicted that only 90 tons would be created. So our 100 tons is actually a 10% surplus. Everyone should be happy. There's going to be more chocolate than we predicted. And aren't we the most wonderful government ever because we exceeded even our best estimates and we're just wonderful. And so it was his job to go back and search through the physical news media and go, where are all the places we mentioned that we were going to produce 150 tons of chocolate and rearrange those and say we were only going to produce 90 tons of chocolate so that nobody can actually prove that we're just making this crap up and we're lying to you every single day about everything. So that was his job. And basically the whole book was written around his perspective throughout this journey. There's all kinds of drama in it. It's wonderfully suspenseful and it's very well written. But that's as far as I'm going to go in the details because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But Julia, on the other hand, written last year. So 1949, 51 plus 24, 73 years or whatever, 75 years later, Sandra Newman writes this book called Julia. And in that book, the next biggest character in the book was a character by the name of Julia in 1984. And so that's why her book is named Julia. And it's written from the perspective of Julia. So entirely different perspective than Winston's perspective and what she was experiencing as a woman. And so it's very interesting. So far, I'm into the book. It's very interesting and enlightening to hear some of the same storylines of 1984 that are written from her perspective. Now, some of it is stuff that you remember from 1984 events. Some of it is entirely new because, of course, she had a different job. She worked in a different area. She's a woman. She lived in a different place than Winston. Different dynamics at play. She was a part of different government organizations. She was also a government worker. She worked on the versificator machine, and she talks about that. But anyway, entirely different perspective. Some of it is just the difference of being a different character and having different experiences in that same story. Some of it is very much so a woman's perspective on things that, quite frankly, I never thought about, right? 1984 is written from the perspective of Winston Smith, a man, written by George Orwell, a man, read by me, a man. There's certain things that I just never considered. Maybe George didn't consider when he wrote them, and or Winston, it wasn't necessarily something Winston as a character in the book would think about being a man. So it's really fun and interesting to just kind of look behind the curtain from another angle on the same story that I know so well. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. And my recommendation to you all, if you haven't read 1984, probably it makes sense to read or listen to 1984 first. It's not that long. It's a relatively small book, like most of Orwell's writings, maybe 10 hours or so on an audiobook. So you can knock that out in a day or two. Then you'll have reference points for reading or listening to Julia. Or what could be more interesting is reading Julia first. If you haven't read 1984, I would guess a lot of people who would be interested in reading Julia likely have read 1984 first. So some of you might be in the unique position of not having read 1984 first and could kind of bring the perspective of the reverse, hearing Julia's side of the story first and then adding Winston's perspective on the story. So that was all I wanted to cover, given the anniversary of VE Day. And something too, Trump brought it up, and I thought he was right in making the point. Now, it's always questionable about how he makes the point, but I thought it was on point for him to bring up the fact that Europe celebrates VE Day, and we don't really talk about it here that much, and we should, because we were a big part of it. And it's something that we should celebrate, in my opinion, together. And that was kind of the point Trump was making, was we should probably celebrate this more than we do. So I thought I would share it with you all. 1984 is something significant in the literature of human history. And also reach out if you plan to read them, you have read them. I love talking literature and different people's perspective on reading. It's a blessing and it's a curse that some of our greatest literature, music, art, etc., comes as a result of some of our most awful experiences as human beings, whether it's personal experience or societal trials, tribulations, heartbreak, but it does result in some magnificent things for the rest of us to share and think about. In this case, science fiction, where it's talking about what the future would be like and how does that really compare to what we're experiencing here in this great technology revolution. We've had the industrial revolution. To me, this is the technology revolution. And also, as truck drivers, how is that playing out for us? Touch base with me along the way if you're reading it, and we'll revisit this here in a month. The pre-trip is complete for this week. No defects detected. Get that seat adjusted. Let's push the buttons in. We've got work to do. Trans Carolina Permits is based out of North Carolina. They've been in business since 1977, and they've got a team with a ton of experience in all of our favorite part of trucking, which of course is the government. They provide a portfolio of services for the trucking industry, various applications and permits, FMCSA authority, 2290s, IRP tags, DMV tags, trailer plates, along with state filings for your business. Not to mention they have a compliance program. They'll help you with clearinghouse setup and queries, IFTA, and mileage reporting. So your state-by-state mileage, your fuel purchase tracking, and get that wrapped up into a nice little bundle for quarterly filings. They're a one-stop shop for your trucking needs. You can find them on Facebook and LinkedIn, or check out their website, transcarolinapermits.com, or give them a call at 1-800-899-4870.
It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 Experience. Let's hit the road.
Let's drop down to line 3 and knock out the money line this week. Let's talk truck parking. We've got a parking problem, and it's one of those perpetual and daily problems truckers face, along with shippers, receivers, traffic, crappy roads, etc., that it's too persistent and important to continue to not deal with. Interestingly, in my conversations with truckers from around the world, we're not alone in this. When I was in the UK and talking to truckers, and it comes up in our interview with Matt, it's a problem in the UK, in Britain. It's one of the things that came up in my conversation with the Copy Southbound folks in Australia of parking, truck stops, amenities, conveniences being in places that actually matter and make a meaningful difference in truck drivers' lives. The problem exists all over the place. The other uphill battle that we're facing is, and I don't mean to be dark or gloomy, but society doesn't want us around. They just want the service we provide. And some of it we brought on ourselves. We all know this to be true. Contrary to popular current belief, this is not just a recent phenomenon. 30 years ago, when I started trucking in the 90s, truckers were leaving a mess, and we still are today. Now, maybe parking etiquette is worse now. Maybe there's just more of us being truckers, us being people, all on the same land. Maybe we've been squeezed into fewer and fewer spots, so our mess piles up faster and is more noticeable that way. Maybe there's more cameras around to document it, more security guards to shove us on our way. Regardless, we do continue to do this to ourselves. And the many are continuously being further punished for the acts of the few. Now, I shared an article on Facebook from the UK about how truckers in what they call laybys, which is places on the side of the road cut out for truckers and other travelers like RVers to park, usually a few spots. People are leaving messes there. People are staying there longer than is allowed. In some cases, the government's kind of setting everybody up for failure by placing these laybys in places where there's going to be conflicts. In the case of the article, they talked about a cemetery that was near the lay-by parking spots, and people were wanting to claim they couldn't use those parking spots to visit the cemetery because there were truckers there, they were staying too long. And of course, we know it doesn't seem to matter what country, anytime the public meets truckers in close proximity, there's going to be the usual problems and the usual overblown sensationalism of these encounters. And let's face it, usually truckers come off as the bad guys in these interactions. I'll share that article again in case you missed it. I'll also share an article from Georgia recently released about a guy who spent the better part of the last 20 years fighting the government in his area as he's tried to open a truck stop relatively close to Atlanta in the general vicinity of Atlanta. And that finally resulted in basically him giving up between the municipalities fighting him fighting and suing and bringing it all the way up. I think he made it all the way up to the district appellate court, like one step away from the Supreme Court. He fought it a number of different times and ultimately he lost. And there's no truck stop and he sold the land and it's over. One more example of people demonstrating they don't want us around. I live in Buckeye, Arizona, which is on the west side of Phoenix, about 30 miles west of downtown, which when I moved here over a decade ago was a pretty sleepy part of the Phoenix metro area. Lots of fields, lots of farms, farm animals, hay fields, beet fields, corn fields, rose fields, watermelon fields. It was kind of a forgotten area, right? It wasn't close enough to be part of the city. You oftentimes had to explain to people where Buckeye was and that it wasn't in California. Most people didn't come out this far away from, air quotes, the city. But now, this part of the valley between Buckeye, Goodyear, Surprise, Litchfield Park, Avondale, it resembles more of Ontario, California, or San Bernardino, California. It's becoming a mecca for warehouses. Literally hundreds of warehouses have popped up in 20-mile radius here of where I live. East, west, north, south of me, we're surrounded by warehouses. Partly that's because of California's continued unfriendly business climate and businesses moving over to Arizona. As a result, they can be based out of Arizona or the trucks can be domiciled in Arizona, and there's certain benefits to that. But also, the population growth of Phoenix has contributed to that, and there's been plenty of new manufacturers moving operations here for one reason or another. But literally, we've had hundreds of new warehouses built in the last 5 years. There are literally many dozens of them under construction in my area right now. And the same has been going on in other parts of Phoenix as well. The north side, massive semiconductor plants being built up there, and all the supporting businesses that will go into that. On the east side, out in Mesa and in those areas, continued growth, more warehouses. Then on the southeast side, headed down the 10 as it heads towards Tucson, more warehouses, distribution centers, Amazon. Then that's not even including all the other ones that look like warehouses, such as server farms and other things like that. But what hasn't been growing is the number of truck stops at nearly the rate. And along with that means what we haven't seen is available truck parking to service all of these businesses growing at the appropriate rate. Now, Love's, Pilot Flying J, TA Petro, and others have been trying to, but the cities will not let them. The businesses here, you can go out on the 10 or the 303 or the 202 and you see that the trucks are here. The business is here for these truck stops. But the truck stops aren't here. And cities like Glendale and Surprise continue to openly fight new truck stops. It's dirty, it's smelly, it's more traffic, it's noisy, it brings pollution, it brings crime, it brings prostitution, or as we now call it, human trafficking. Like calling it something nicer changes what it is. But they keep building freeways and they keep building warehouses because they want the tax revenue, they want the jobs, they just don't want us. Now, another link I'll share is one that I just saw yesterday. It was from somebody posted it. It's from a city in Kentucky. I forget the name of the city. But anyway, they decided that they're going to start charging businesses if they unload trucks and the truck is on the public right of way, which we all know what happens next. A new fee for truckers. So in lieu of anything meaningful being done by our various government agencies, although they keep spending money on studies, and the travel center industry not keeping up with servicing our parking needs. And at best, we seem to get more travel centers in places that are less than ideal because they can't build them where they're actually needed. Now we start to see new businesses sprouting up, like the Truck Parking Club, trying to help solve a serious problem that we have. And of course, it's all at a cost to truckers. The truck stop chains are reacting by making more and more spots pay to park. They're understanding that they have a limited commodity that has greater and greater demand. So they're monetizing it. That's what we do in America. We've got rest areas going out of service for repairs, but less frequently do they ever get reopened. And not that those are in the best locations typically, either for deliveries, picking up, just planning around your ELDs. We see continued ramp up of enforcement, no pun intended, on ramps, off ramps, places like that. Not that those are great places to park, anyways, but we continue to see more enforcement there. We see more boots and windshield locks on parking lots, more fines and regulations for street parking in more and more areas, more shippers and receivers saying no parking before and after loading, even though they have the room. And even when we're there for the purposes of delivering or picking up, more and more places not letting us use bathroom. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, could we help ourselves more by being better stewards of the places we do have? Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing things like the parking etiquette page that we can share with others, encouragement cards so you can share with each other. But let's be real, that's only going to make a small dent in an overall solution. We're not the entire part of the problem. And it's not just because we leave pee bottles lying around that we don't have enough parking. But the reality is the country needs an attitude adjustment about truckers. And I think we're the only ones who can deliver it. At some point, it's going to come to something significant being done by us in order to move the needle in the right direction. I hate to say it out loud, but I think, oh boy, I think we need a federal department overseeing truck parking. The cities, counties, and states are going to continuously play the not in my backyard game. They get elected. And I can assure you that a good way to not get elected or not get reelected is to drop a truck stop in the middle of your town. We get beat by the game of democracy because we are not constituents of where we're doing business. All the cities that you deliver in typically are not your hometown, but that's the only place where your vote matters is in your hometown. So they basically vote us out. They outnumber us in their town. And even they outnumber the business owners and the people, and they forget the fact that they ordered all this stuff. They wanted us there. It never resonates far enough to go, gee, you know what, Margaret, we placed our 90th order this year on Amazon. You know what? I bet that creates a problem for truck parking. We should probably call our councilman and say, you know what? Actually, we're in favor of that new Love's going down the street here in Glendale, Arizona. That's never going to happen. So we're always going to be on the short end of the stick here. And so we're going to have to do something more dramatic. Interestingly, when I was in Birmingham, England, I did see, because I was doing searches for truck stops, and one that popped up, and I saw this in some other metropolitan areas in the UK. Actually, the city had built some truck parking areas. And of course, they were pay to park, but they had amenities. They had showers and stuff. So it was a lock secured yard and you paid. They had a website where you go reserve a spot. They had limits and rules. I don't know if there was a third party doing the operations, but it was literally on the city government's webpage. And so that to me, that was interesting. It got me thinking. It's an interesting concept because not only do we have a shortage of truck parking, the parking we do have is largely in the wrong spots to make logistical sense or to be efficient. So we need a bigger, bolder plan. So my proposal is this. I propose a per person charge by the federal government to the states for providing adequate truck parking. So based on the number of people in your cities, and we can throw in some data like how much stuff you order. So if the people in New York City order more crap per person from Amazon or wherever than the people in Birmingham, Alabama do, then their tax should be higher. And especially if they order more stuff and they have even less truck parking currently as compared to the amount of stuff that they order, then your tax rate goes up. We've got all these ELDs and we've got all these transportation management systems and systems at shippers. They know where they're shipping all this stuff. They know where they're delivering all this stuff. Literally, we know where the vast majority of boxes in this country go every single day. Let's use that data and help justify making truckers' jobs and lives better for once. You want to buy all this stuff from all over the world and get it shipped right to your front door, then pony up the parking spots for the truck drivers to make it possible. And if you're doing it already, you've built truck stops in the appropriate spots to service your communities appropriately, then we'll give you a discount on your taxes. You'll get a deduction on your truck parking surcharge. But if you're not, then this federal agency is going to take that money from the states and it's going to build the parking for you. Because at the end of the day, what really matters is how do we get parking spots in a place that make it feasible for logistics to happen efficiently and successfully and safely in this country. And I know what you're going to say. Tony, they're going to muck it up. They're the federal government, for Pete's sake. Well, that's why the second part of my proposal is this. I propose that I get put in charge. A former truck driver, or at least at a minimum, let's make it that somebody who's got at least 10 years under their belt in the trucking industry, who has been a truck driver, is in charge. Those are the criteria. Put it in the Constitution and make it so we don't get some other goofball who's never driven a truck running the organization that makes truck parking feasible in this country. All right, that's it for the money line this week. Once again, share your thoughts and ideas. I'm open to better ideas, but I'm limited right now to the best that I can come up with or that I can find and steal from somebody else online. So you got to help me out here. And who knows, one day I may need your vote. But in the meantime, let's drop it down to line 4 for a quick break. And then we're going to talk to Matt, HGV driver, Lorry driver from over in the United Kingdom. Great conversation with him. We'll be back with you in just a minute. True TMS is a cloud-based transportation management system. Being in the cloud makes integrations faster and you're able to access the platform from anywhere. It has intuitive planning, on-demand reporting, and easy order creation, rating, and invoices, which turns tedious admin work into streamlined automated workflows. The folks at True TMS have decades of trucking and liquid experience, and they care about this industry. They don't just sell you a product, they're invested in your success. Visit their website, truetms.com, and of course, tell them Channel 19 sent you.
More than anything, this show's about bringing back the sense of community we used to find on the CB, especially good old Channel 19. No rants, no corporate spin, just long-form storytelling from someone who's been behind the wheel, built the fleet, hit rock bottom, and climbed right back up.
All right, so I've got Matt Rayner on the phone. You're from the UK, right? Like, what part of the UK are you from?
Originally, not that far outside of London, but I've
Okay.
moved around a bit. I live in Lincolnshire currently, which is a bit sleepy. Everything's done at their own pace up here. It's nice than being down south because it's a real sort of mad race down south. The further south you go, the worse the driving gets.
I have no idea. I'm Googling Lincolnshire right now to get an idea.
It's one of
Okay.
the biggest counties in the UK. And it also has, funnily enough, fun fact, the busiest port in the UK via tonnage because it's what they call ro-ro, roll on, roll off. So we do a lot of trade with Scandinavia and Holland through that port. And that's where I tend to work out of a lot.
Okay. So this is a couple, 3 hours north of London. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, it has the A1 that runs through it, which is the major route north out of London, which is an old Roman road originally. You'll find a lot of roads and that will be based on Roman roads and that. The A5 was a Roman road, the A1, other ones like that tend to branch out. And then it gets to Scotland where they just decided they're all barbarians and there's just sort of built a wall to keep them up there.
Right, right.
If you're from America, you're very used to seeing highways and that. You can go to some parts of the UK where there is no highway. Like Norfolk has no motorway, highway at all. And some of the roads, which is quite funny, Wiltshire's another one like this, where I've seen videos of Americans and they say, how is this like a national road? And it's so narrow and it's 60 miles an hour, which is our national speed limit. And you've got cars zipping about left, right, and center, and like you're inches, centimeters, or inches, like half an inch off the trees and the hedges that are on the edge of the road. Like I don't like driving in Wiltshire because it's really narrow. Like I've been on unnamed roads in Lincolnshire that are a lot wider than national routes in Wiltshire. Lovely place, just not taking a truck down.
Right, right. Yeah, I went to university for 1 year in Ireland. I was in Cork and I'd rent cars on the weekend to go driving around. And yeah, that kind of reminds me of how you discussed it. Some of the roads in Ireland that were air quotes, major roads, and you've got stone walls on each side, no shoulder, and barely enough room for two cars. And yeah, it's just the normal speed limit. Like this is okay.
Oh yeah, Ireland is actually one of the few countries in Europe I have not visited. I have not driven in
Really, right next door.
because I never had the opportunity to do any work out there. Because when I was on music, it was all the music touring, so we went to all sorts of cities. My first experience driving in another country was into France, and they sent me to Paris. And Paris is an experience. Like just driving, because obviously we drive right-hand drive over here.
Yep.
I was driving in a right-hand drive truck on the right-hand side of the road.
So you're
So I'm
sitting on the
on the
shoulder line.
wrong, yeah. And the Parisians are, well, they make everybody else in the world outside of like Bangkok or India look tame. They show no fear whatsoever. They'll cut you up, they'll do whatever, but most Europeans, they'll cut you up and disappear. They've got places to be, things to do. You're in the way.
Yeah.
They'll go round you and they're off straight down the road. Because I prefer driving in Europe than I do driving here.
Yeah, my wife and I went to Paris a couple years ago, and there was more than one Uber ride in Paris that we were certain we were not gonna make it to the end of that ride. It was people were nuts.
No, they are. I've driven in Russia.
Really?
Yeah.
Truck?
That
What, truck in Russia?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
The truck I've done to St. Petersburg, which is beautiful. It is an absolutely stunning city. Moscow, didn't really feel Moscow as much, but if I ever could have the chance to go back to Russia, I would go back to St. Petersburg because they call it the Venice of the North. And I've got pictures of the canals and everything they have in there. And the water is like almost jet black. It's a really, really nice city. The people are really nice as well. I missed the chance of going up in an old Soviet military helicopter as well. I didn't realize that was a thing. Otherwise, I would have done that.
were you over in St. Petersburg when you were doing the music tour stuff?
Yes, it was part of the music tour, and we went through the Estonian border because we did various stops around Europe. But because Europe is split between Europe, the European Union, and inside the European Union, you've got something called Schengen, which is
Hmm.
borderless travel, but not every country is part of Schengen. So some countries have border control, others don't. So we had an American band. We had Disturbed with us. So we had American documentation, Swiss documentation, because we had equipment from Switzerland, as well as equipment from the UK, which was part of the EU at the time. So we had three different documents, and they weren't like single pages; they were wadges of what they call a carnet, which is allows for international travel. And we had to go through the Russian border through Estonia. Now the Estonian side is all electronic, but the Russian side isn't. And it is kind of strange when you're trying to explain to a Russian border guard some of the documentation via a Polish, your double driver, your second driver, who's Polish, who also speaks Russian. That is an experience, but we managed to get through there. 6.5 hours, which is very short for a Russian trip into Russia. Sometimes they can take up to 2 days, depending on how awkward they want to be. But I don't know, because in America, you've got the states. I would imagine the states function like Schengen. So you just drive across the border, and the rules of the road might change, the speed limits might change, signs might change. But generally speaking, you don't stop.
Yeah, I mean, we have ports of entry that, they'll have a weigh station and they might check your logbook or the tacky for you guys. I mean, not so much anymore with everybody being on electronic devices. I mean, normally they're just weighing you. They've got scanners now and devices that communicate with the scale and tell them, hey, are you a well-run trucking company or are you kind of shady and tend to fail inspections? And then you have a greater chance of being pulled around back and inspected. But if you're with a company that's pretty well on the up and up, normally it's a weigh in motion setup and you just roll across it or just get bypassed altogether with your little transponder.
So is that like when you roll across, say for example, say you're in Arizona, and
Yep.
then you move uh to the next state. I'm trying to remember my map of the US now.
Yeah, like New Mexico. Yep.
Yeah, so say you're rolling from Arizona into New Mexico. So when you roll across state lines, you can just carry on rolling if without like there's no like border control across the road, like you cannot
No.
proceed. Well,
No.
so it's very similar to what they have in Europe, Schengen. Now, when I was doing it, I would leave. I would have to show my passport at Dover because that was where we did also border control because the UK was not part of Schengen. But I did one trip. I did Dover to Stuttgart in Germany, down to Barcelona, and then back up to Berlin again. And once I got over out off the ferry at Calais, I never saw a border control point in those three countries. I did France or four countries: France, Belgium, Germany, Germany back to France, down to Spain, Spain back to France, back to Germany again. And it was quite bizarre when you think about it. It's the entirety of Europe, but there's no stopping. There's no border control points. There are checkpoints that the trucking whatever the equivalent of this, I don't know, you have like a state troopers or something. But
Yeah.
each country has a department that specializes in looking after and going over commercial vehicles. In the UK, it's called the DVSA,
Yep.
Drivers and Vehicle Standards Agency, and they're responsible for administering checks on the road, commercial vehicles, make sure they're all compliant, records, stuff like that. And if they find anything they don't like, obviously then they can investigate further. But outside of those, there's really not anything in Europe like that. And I like that because I can go from 3 or 4 different countries in a day and not stop once outside of my mandatory breaks, which is quite fun actually. I miss doing that. I miss driving on the continent.
So now do your drive just solely within the UK now?
Yes, I do predominantly what we call ferry work, which is trailers that come in from Europe as like just standalone trailers. They get loaded, they get taken to a dock, they get loaded onto a boat, sail across the North Sea, and they get dropped off. They get taken off the boat. We go in, pick them up, do the delivery, do any collections that need going on, send them back to the dock, and off they go again, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. So I deal with that. So it's all European trailers for us
Gotcha.
because when you are over here, the trailers that we have here are different from the ones they use in Europe. I don't know if you noticed.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, the ones in Europe, I do believe it's a legal requirement to have wooden slats or metal slats that run down the length of the trailer inside the curtains because we predominantly in Europe we use curtain siders for transport because they are very versatile rather than your box fans and that. Whereas
Yep.
America, they tend to use more box fans. Your curtain siders, in inverted commas, tend to get used like for coverage, like on steel. I've seen a lot of them. You might have
Yep.
the odd. I did a brief look at some of your trailers. They
Yeah, we
have
have
a
some
curtain
curtain
sider,
sides, but mostly like my brother, he pulls the curtain side, but our curtain sides, like the whole thing slides forward or backwards. It
like a whole
doesn't
cover.
lift up. Yeah, the whole cover basically collapses like an accordion to one side or the other. Where the ones that I saw in the UK, they go up. You slide them up to be able to
Ah,
access the freight,
no,
right?
the ones over here they slide uh either backwards or forwards, and then you can load from both
Okay.
sides. So you can do like because of the nature of the size of our country, and it's just easier for um you can fit all sorts of stuff. You can load. I've loaded on a curtain sider. I've loaded steel pipe that comes in through the roof, so the whole roof slides up. Then I've also gone and loaded. So I've loaded steel, and then I've gone to a place, tipped that steel. I've then gone round the corner, and I've loaded pallets of mustard on the same trailer,
Yeah.
and that's why they get used a lot over here because they're incredibly versatile pieces of equipment. But you do see box vans occasionally, but they tend to be used for like mail. There's a lot of mail Amazon trailers. There's a lot of Amazon trailers now.
Yeah.
that use those. But sometimes it's nice to have a box fan. You don't have to open the curtains, which are great fun in the winter when they're incredibly hot in the summer when you're working in them. And in the wintertime, when the wind is bad, sometimes I get to a place and it'd be like, oh, go in this big yard somewhere, go over there, drive and open your curtains. I take one look at it. I went, no. Like, why not? I said, because I'll be flying off with it. It'll go on the roof. And I've had, where was I? I was doing paper reels. Now, paper reels, big 3-ton reels of paper that go on these trailers. And I had to unload it on a farm because they were using it as storage. And I'm stood inside this barn with the forklift driver watching the curtain flail around like a headless snake in the wind. And I said to forklift driver, I said, "You want to go and grab it then?" And he looked at me and told me to, yeah, he used rather expletive language for that.
Yeah, so they let you haul paper in a curtain side.
Yeah, they have to be strapped. We have we have inspection checks, but because of we have no or very little in the way of height limit here, our motorway bridges or highway bridges are normally taller than 16 foot 6 inches. So we run trailers that are up to 16 foot tall, high.
Interesting.
So we can load like reels of paper. When I worked for a certain company, our standard trailer height was 4.7 meters. Now, if you bear with me, and I will convert that to imperial because it wasn't written on the headboard of the trailer. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. 4.7 meters. That is 15 foot 4 inches tall. So our trailers were running around 15 and a half feet tall. And I've seen some of your bridges, your highway bridges in America are like 13 foot.
Yeah, our truck
So
standard height for us is 13.6, and there's plenty of spots where you're not getting through with 13 foot 6 inches.
and we run double deck trailers as well, which is odd because in Europe, a lot of Europe, particularly Germany, their maximum height limit is 4 meters, which is like 14, 13, 9, 14 foot at a push. And then that lets into a whole different section of rules and regulations, mega trailers, lifting roofs. It depends on how long you want to talk for.
So you had to have some sort of equipment that would universally go, well, I mean, you were talking about even just all the way to Russia, like going through multiple countries and into
Yes,
Russia. Like you got to have a piece of equipment that you know is going to make it through all the weird variations of uh,
a lot of
limits.
a lot of the time particularly the foreign drivers and that they will all run equipment that is under the 4 meter mark because some countries are 4 meters, some countries are not. It's just easier to run it as 4 meters. The UK is an outlier because we have no such height limit. There are bridges around the country that are less than 16 foot 6, but they're clearly marked. In Europe, I think Poland, Germany is certainly a 4 meter height limit on a standard truck. So bridges are 4 meters or less, generally speaking, out there, which is why when we ran in Europe, we ran on what they call low ride, which is a mega trailer, and it's to do with volume. So you lower the bed of the trailer and you increase the volume of the trailer and still be within the 4 meter height limit. So they run around on little wheels in comparison to a standard truck, smaller tires, and they have lifting roofs. They're used predominantly in automotive with stillages to get the maximum amount out of the trailer. Because I've had trailers when I've done deliveries to Nissan and Stellantis, the stillages are all the way to the roof, and on each corner is a handle that you pump that lifts the roof up so they can actually get the stuff out from inside because it will go all the way to the roof. You might have maybe quarter of an inch of a gap between the roof of the trailer and the actual stillage of the stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. We don't really have it. I don't think we have anything really comparable to that here. I mean, we do have some trailers that are, like you said, that have smaller tires, so they have increased capacity, like moving vans and even some of the enclosed vehicle hauling trailers. I mean, most of our vehicle hauling trucks are open, no enclosure, but we do have some for usually for fancier cars or hauling them from car shows or big auctions. But yeah, to my knowledge. None of them are adjustable.
We have, because our car haulers, do you have the ones that car haulers that sit over the cab?
Yes.
Ah, so yeah, so you're the same because there's always a big thing with car transporter drivers is they have some of the smallest cabs that you have to like live in, some of these guys.
Yep.
And I spoke to one and I was like, "Oh, how do you get dressed in the morning?" He goes, "I have to lie on my bed." I was like, I couldn't live in it. And I live in essentially what's a rabbit hutch, and that's a full size truck, let alone one of those. And they're
Yep.
also the longest. They're different length limits for car transporters. So trying to get one of those into a parking area can be interesting. And they overhang as well. So they
Yeah.
overhang on the front, overhang on the rear. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, those guys here make really good money. I mean, because they've got to load them all, they got to get them on there just right and not damage anything. They're getting 7, 8 cars or trucks on there. And like you said, that they're usually flat top sleepers for us on our conventional trucks. It's the smallest sleeper. It's the sleeper like that people had back in the 70s, right? A coffin sleeper that was, you could you could lie down flat on your back, and that's about as much width as there was for it.
I've seen them load because the different ports in the UK have different cars that come in. And where I do a lot of work, and Mercedes bring their cars in through that port. So I see them load Mercedes cars and that, and BMWs just down the road, and I'm watching them, and they've got the deck is all down, and they're
Hmm.
driving this car up, and clang, 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 and they start going up, 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 and it's like almost like a 40 sort of 40-degree angle. And I was like, yeah, that's not for me. It's really not for me. I don't like looking up at the sky out of my car.
Right. And then it's, getting out of the car and back off of the trailer without it blows my mind there's not more accidents. People falling off these things and hurting
Oh yeah,
themselves.
they're definitely like I've got massive respect for car transport drivers because like some of the places that they put car dealerships and you're expected to, particularly the ones in London that you've got to drive to, like your big names and like Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, and they pick a place right in the middle of town and you have
Right.
to try and get it there. And it's like, yeah, nah. I've driven in London. I don't like driving in London. I can do it, but it's just something about that city. It's not the worst in the UK to drive in, but you have to be a bully to drive in London. Because if you're not a bully, you don't get anywhere. But because
Yeah,
everyone's a bully, yeah, it's cutthroat.
right. Yeah, it kind of sounds like New York City for us.
Oh,
You got to
I
be
couldn't
pushy and
drive.
aggressive, and even if, I grew up in the Midwest, so we're kind of more laid back and not that mentality, but you got to turn it on when you get to the big cities in America. You're just, like you said, not going to get anything done.
There was a video I watched of a chap who was trying to make a turn in, it was like an intersection, and the cars parked right up to the intersection. And I'm watching this chap trying to make this turn in his truck. And it's just like, I just couldn't do it. I just keep driving straight. Just keep driving straight. And there's another chap, I don't know if he's still doing it or not, but he had a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a maverick. He drove a low loader picking up plant machinery in New York City itself. And like, Jesus, I thought I've seen like crazy cities in Europe. Like the parking in New York City is unreal. Like they just park on a corner.
Yep, they park all the way around the corner.
For me in the UK, parking on a corner on a junction intersection is illegal. So the cars get moved. Now I was watching like cars parked there and they're double parked as well.
Hmm.
It's like I just makes me so I just trigger my anxiety. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. People who take trucks into New York City, fair play to you guys because I
I,
can't do it.
I did it when I was young. Used to go in there and we'd deliver in there. There's a place called Hunts Point Market that we would go into to deliver. And I mean, it's kind of in the bowels of the city, right? Like they make videos like movies about what it was like on Hunts Point Boulevard, like with the pimps and the hookers and the drug addicts. Like it's
So
a
it's been there
gnarly
for a
part of
long
town.
time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's been the market. I mean, part of the market was like a military depot back in the 1800s. It's we don't have much old stuff here in America, but that's about as old as it gets. Um, so yeah, and then we'd go pick up we call it LTL or less than a truckload, multiple pickups around New York City and all the five boroughs and then get out of there and I can't like I would never do it today. I can't believe I did it back then and between that and the low bridges and the parking, like you said, and the traffic, like I don't know what we did it for the money. It always paid good. Nobody else wanted to do it, so you did the
That's why
work
it
nobody
paid
else
good.
wanted. Yeah.
Like there's another video, and this guy, he's come in from the wrong end, and this loading bay is like right out on the road, and he has to swing across like like multi-direction traffic and try and back in. I'm like, you wouldn't like I've had tough reverses off of main roads and like over here, but that is just I say I take my hat off to those guys because that they are just on another level. People who
Yeah,
regularly drive trucks in New York cities have must be made of sterner stuff.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I remember I had one in Detroit where I got back in the day before we had cell phones and you'd have to call them up from a payphone and get directions from somebody at the warehouse and this guy told me and it's a big road, right? It's 3, 4 lanes going each direction and it's not a freeway, it's just a city street that has lots of lanes. Speed limit's probably 50 miles an hour or so. And he's like, okay, when you get to this particular street, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go into the opposite lane of traffic because you have to back in from the wrong direction or you never get into the dock, and you're gonna have to go about a mile down the wrong way of 4 lanes, and then you're gonna see our driveway, and then you can pull up and cut across all 4 lanes, basically diagonally, and then back into our dock. That's how you gotta do it, and you've got anxiety the whole way going, what have I got myself into? And this load only pays $700. And but you
Start
do it,
questioning
right? You
things.
just do it. Yeah, you start questioning a lot of your choices in life at that point.
We have we have that. It's less the city stuff. It's more the rural. Like I have taken like deliveries to farms and other places, and they're lovely, picturesque parts of the country, but you should not be taking a truck anywhere near them. And like you get down there and you meet someone coming the other way, a local, so they're bombing down the road because they know the road.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I'm doing 20 mile an hour because I've got hedges on either side coming up to me mirrors. And next thing I know, I get this local just come roaring up in front of me, slam his anchors on, and then look at me like, It's like, yeah, I'm doing a delivery. And he comes up and said, where are you going? I was like, to the farm. Oh, I'm like, well, yeah, how else do you expect stuff to get around?
Right.
So the local the locals who've been there for ages, who have grown up down there are nice. It's the ones that move from the cities that they're the ones that are the issue because they they don't seem to understand it. I had a woman that I had to make a reverse half a mile to the nearest sort of pulling place we could get past. And she's all huff and puff. It's like, what are you doing down here? It's like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm delivering to the farm that's been here for 800 years. So, like, surely you should know. Like, you see tractors running up and down here because I was taking fertilizer, bags of fertilizer, and that. It's like, surely you know trucks have to come down here. There's a farm that I live near a farm, so there's going to be
Right.
farm-related traffic.
Right.
But because of
They-
the nature of our country, the roads are narrow. They're not as narrow and as crazy as they are in Italy. Like I've heard some real horror stories of like places in Italy, like up in the mountains, and there's like a what are they slaughterhouses up in the mountains and that. And like I've seen some of the switchback roads in Italy, and it's like, yeah, that's not for me. I'll stick to my motorways.
Yeah. I remember I was driving in Spain, this is probably 20 years ago, in a car, and I ended up in a going up a mountain road, and I got to the town, and there was a gate across the road, the main road, and so I parked there, and I'm looking around trying to figure out, well, what am I gonna do? There's a gate across the main road and it's locked. It's got a padlock on a chain and a padlock. And eventually somebody poked their head out the window and they said, "Yeah, he's gone for the day. He'll be back tonight and then he can open the gate up for you." And I'm like, what in the world? How
Oh,
is this?
that's the Spanish. Like they run on their own time. When I was in Spain, like inside the major cities, it's fine, but when you go
Mhm.
sort of further out, everyone just does their own thing, and they get things done when they want to get things done.
Yeah, and there's not, I mean, Americans are kind of known for this, right? Of just their, I don't know, driven nature. That's probably the nicest way to put it. A bit of a frantic, just always in a hurry, always just whatever it takes to get things done. And it becomes a real culture clash really quick with especially, Latin American countries here in the Western Hemisphere that derive a lot of theirs from the Spanish mentality of, oh, there's more important things than that, like
Yeah,
siesta.
they do have a different outlook on. There's a lot of that in Europe, particularly with like trucking and stuff like that, because in the UK it's very go 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 go, but in Europe it's a bit different. Like you'll see guys they're on their break, but they've got in their trucks a whole full-on pantry of food, and they're out there. They've got like a gas bottle stove, almost essentially a bit like a barbecue, and they're cooking stuff and that. It's a lot of the Eastern Europeans. They tend to cook their own food.
Hmm.
And because they live in their trucks and they have their own trailers, they don't swap them or anything. They've got like I've seen them. They got like a pallet locker, which is a big metal, essentially a box that's underslung underneath the trailer. And this guy's pulled it down and he's got his cook set up and he's got his pantry, so he's got all his sauces and spices and everything else. And then he's got his fridge in the truck as well, so he cooks meat. And sitting there eating my McDonald's. I'm thinking, I'm doing something wrong here. Like this guy's out here cooking himself a proper meal and I'm eating fast food. Something's not
Yeah,
quite right.
he's running a caravanning trip over there.
Some of them do. There's a guy on Instagram. He's an Italian fella. He's used to drive. He's had two companies now. He's on his way to his third, but he's always like he never has any fast food. If he's gone for like to a restaurant, it's a proper restaurant. He'll find out local. He'll park up somewhere locally, and he'll go and seek out a local restaurant, and he'll like whatever like the food that he posts is just like wow. I know it's Italy and they love their food out there, but that's a whole other level. And then if he can't do that when he's not around there, he'll cook himself. I've done like steak, pasta, various other Italian dishes, and that like all fresh ingredients and everything. I'm sitting there thinking, like, if he can do it, why can't I do it?
Yeah.
But then I don't have the room in my truck because I don't have the space on because I don't keep the same trailer. I change my trailer almost every day. So because I'm not out all week either. Whereas the guys in Europe, particularly the long haul stuff, they're out there for months at a time. My job is Monday to Friday. So I leave my house on the Monday and I don't get back till the Friday. But some of those guys I've spoken to, they're out for 3.5, 4 months at a time. They
Wow.
go back home for maybe a week and then they do it all again. It's like what you guys do out there, where you can be out for months on end without even seeing your home state, let alone your hometown.
Yeah. So you're sleeping in the truck
Yes,
4 or 5 nights a week?
yes.
Okay.
They're not like because of our rules and regs and that, though I do envy the space that you guys have out there. I had a look at Volvo's latest VNL,
Hmm.
the big one, and I'm thinking, wow, that's essentially a camper for us over here. And I'm looking at it, it's got a microwave and a full size, a big fridge, whereas we've just got a drawer that comes out under the bed and that. And it's just thinking, it's like that's on a whole nother level.
The late 90s, we really started to get bigger cabs. We've got the integrated sleepers, we've got the stand-up sleepers. So you've got 70-inch bunks. I mean, the ones that are sky rises, they go 8 feet tall from the floor of the bunk all the way to the roof with the double bunks, or you can have additional shelving or whatever you've got. Yeah, it's quite a lot more comfortable than the stuff I started off with even back in the 90s.
Did you, when you came over here, did you get to actually like get in a European truck?
Yeah, I got in one of the Mercedes Benz over at the truck show. I went to the Birmingham Commercial Vehicle Show.
What did you think of the interior?
Yeah, it was it was so small. I mean, it reminded me, so when I started in a cab over engine truck um that had about that size bunk, and my dad had a couple trucks that were about that size. So I mean, I would it wasn't like I'd never been in something that size. It's just I hadn't been in something that size in 20 some years, right?
But it's all, particularly the latest one. Does it, was it the very latest model that they're doing? Because they're in the process of going over onto the new one. Did it looks a bit like a fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Because they've changed the interior slightly on that. Because I've had a Mercedes. I did 2 years in one with the mirrorless
Yep.
setup on it. That was something to get used to. Going from mirrors to mirrorless. Because I know, is it Freightliner? Because they're owned by Mercedes. They
Yep.
have a mirrorless version now. And I think Volvo are doing the same thing. How are you guys accepting of the mirrorless setup versus mirrors?
Yeah, I don't know of anybody who I don't have any friends or anybody who's run one yet. I mean, that technology was kind of brought forth in America by a company, not a manufacturer, but they were selling it as like an add-on, and it didn't have a lot of take rate to it. But yeah, now the newer like the new Volvos and the new Max and the new Freightliners, they have them. So now some people are, and a lot of drivers who are company paid drivers, employees, they're going to start getting them whether they ask for them or not. So we'll see what the chatter is as more people get exposed to them. I was just reading a link on Reddit about people talking about their preferences because it seems pretty common that a lot more trucks are getting the mirrorless or the digital screen instead of the mirrors. And seems like, I don't know, but there's plenty of people who are like, yeah, you get used to it. I mean, it's kind of weird at first, but you get used to it. Then you had some folks who you could tell had been around for a while and they were, let's say, less enthusiastic and they just soon have their mirrors back. Have
For
you used them?
Yeah, I got the, because the Mercedes was the first to market the Actros, which is what Mercedes have. That was the first to come to market with the mirrorless design. They've all subsequently done it. Volvo, MAN, Scania, DAF, even now Iveco have done it. So all followed suit. Now, they've said that it saves on average up to 2% on your fuel. Now, if you've got a fleet of trucks, 2% is a lot of money over the year.
Right.
That's what they were quoting. But as a driver, they have their plus points. Like, I can have my curtain shut and they've got little cutouts in the curtain so I can put the curtain behind the mirror. So if, for example, I hear a noise or something, there was a button on the back of the back wall of the cab that I could press that and it would light up the screens and I could see down both sides without having to peer out of the curtain,
Hmm.
which was good for me.
Right.
Obviously, I wouldn't get out because I'm not risking my life for, I don't know, like a load of cereal, for example. If they want
Right.
it, they can have it. I'm only paid for sleeping in the truck. I'm not paid to be a security guard. And at night time, if you've got drivers who have their full beams on, high beams, whatever you guys call them,
Yeah.
main beams, the big brights and that, or the lights are angled poorly. In a mirror, it reflects, but on a screen, it doesn't. So that was quite good. And if you paid for the option, because it's a Mercedes and everything is an option, they actually had night vision mode. So you could actually reverse at night in a place that was dark. And funnily enough, where we dropped our trailers on our offsite storage yard was completely pitch black. So trying to reverse at night there with mirrors was an absolute pain in the rear end because you couldn't see anything. You put your fog lights on, you just put everything to try and make it a little bit brighter so you could actually see what you were doing. So they helped. But the biggest thing I found with the mirrors is that the left-hand mirror, the offside mirror, that would track the rear of the trailer. So I didn't have to do a blindside reverse because it followed the rear of the trailer. Because obviously with a mirror, after you get to a certain point, it disappears and you're
Yeah.
blind. But that was really, really good. It really did help. Some of the places that we were putting trailers, you do need that. And it worked. When I went back to mirrors, when I changed companies, it's like, oh, I'm going to have to learn how to blindside again.
Yeah, I saw somebody mention that it tracks the end of your trailer automatically, and I was like, well, that's pretty sweet. Like some in the 90s, some of our trucks started getting where you could it was electronic that you could rotate your mirror, but it wasn't automatic. Like you had to fiddle with it yourself while you're trying to back up and keep tapping the button up or down to get it to move right or left in your offside mirror. So it was better than having to go put it in neutral and stick your head over and see if you could try to see out the other window and then put it back in reverse and go a little bit further. So yeah, that seems like a really cool
They
feature.
did take some getting used to. When my second day that I had it, I had a delivery and they have finger bays, which are bays inside of the warehouse.
Hmm.
And I could not line this thing up at all. I've been driving it. I've been driving for a good while, like pretty decent at reversing, and I was looking like I'd only just passed my test. I was all over the place. I ended up at the because it's a current side. They just tipped it outside, but 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I was battling this, and there was too far to the left and then too far to the right, and trying to line it up because the mirrors were because it wasn't the same. And I think I'm just driving myself insane. I like didn't like it, and I hated the mirror cams and stuff. But gradually, I got used to them. But they really did come into their own for roundabouts or traffic circles, as you guys call them. But because it's the big feature of our road network. But with a mirror on a truck that we have over here is you're basically your view to the right and to the left are blocked so by the mirrors. So cars routinely, and I have had it where multiple and no end of times where it's clear. I'm about to go. Next thing you know, this car appears from round the mirror. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, there was a guy already on the roundabout. Oh, good job I stopped. But without the mirror being there, because the camera sits above the door, completely out of your vision, it was great. So I could see coming up to roundabout, nothing there, straight go. Didn't have to worry about stopping or anything. That's where they really did help. And that's where I do miss them the most. Because otherwise it's just like a giant wardrobe mirror hanging off the side of your door and you're having to peek round.
Yeah, a lot of the comments I read, the hardest part getting used to with the digital mirror is backing up in a straight line and, and trying to
Yes,
line yourself up in a parking spot or in a loading dock or something.
I found myself leaning out the window a lot more and looking at my, because I remember being told by a driver when I first started, because I was backing into a space and he was watching me, he was all over the place. And he said, what mirror are you lining yourself up on? And I went, the left one, because obviously right hand drive. And he said, no, 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 ignore that mirror because you're never going to be straight in that mirror. Always go off your driver's side, and that has always stuck with me ever
Right.
ever since. So as long as I'm in a straight line, if I look down there and I look down at the line, I'm in a straight line on my driver's side. I'm straight in the bay. Whereas if I line it up on my left hand side, I'm not going to be straight, and that took basically a relearn when I had the mirror cams because
Hmm.
they didn't sit right. That the view was different because it's a screen
Yeah.
and it's a camera. So I had to relearn essentially how to reverse to line stuff up because I put it on a bay and I'd get a knock on the door and said, "Drive, you need to move." So, what do you mean? And I go down the back and I'm about 6 inches off center of the bay and they can't get the ramp on. It's like, oh, I thought I was straight. Obviously not.
Well, we were talking before I hit record, we were talking a little bit about truck stops and stuff. And one thing, and you're out on the road quite a bit, so you've got to find places to park. I did notice that there quite a few places, like just on the side of the road, where there was a cutoff that looked like it was deliberately designed to be parking spots for trucks.
Laybys traditionally, and this is when the rules of like it's illegal to what they call wild camp which is out like camp anywhere essentially.
Hmm.
Now, trucking, if you want to be picky, could potentially fall into wild camping, but nobody enforces it because truck drivers like you need to park up. But I don't park in laybys as a point because they are your prime target to get your diesel stolen and or your load nicked as well. Like certain areas of the country are notorious for it. You don't unless you're running on fumes and you have nothing on the trailer, like then park up there. But the other thing I don't like is trucks whizzing past at night. I was like,
Right.
nah, I'll park in them like if I haven't got a choice and I've run out of time. Like, but that's very few and far between. And I kick off like royally if I have to. I much prefer truck stops, obviously, less service stations because they're noisy and they're expensive. Industrial estates and areas, a lot more are getting like you can't park there because drivers being drivers ruin it for everybody by leaving rubbish and other stuff around.
Yeah.
But you still can park on a lot of them and that. And by and large, I've had better night's sleep on industrial estates than I have elsewhere, even while loaded.
Yeah, it looked like the places. So I went down there to that, what was it called? Lincoln Farm.
Yes, Lincoln
And there
Farm,
was
yeah.
another one kind of down that way. It looked like they were both charged to park.
Yes, a lot of places are, but we have over here what they call Snap. Now, Snap came about as a way of drivers not having to pay. So essentially, it bills the company. The company have an account. So when you roll into Lincoln Farm, you walk up to the counter inside, and they'll say, obviously when you order your food and that, so how are you paying? Snap or cash or card? And you say Snap. So they'll take your registration number of the truck. They'll put that into a computer, and it'll come up with. So let's say, for example, it's FX, I don't know, 25 ABG. And they'll go da 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 da, da and that'll be like, oh, you work for Joe Blogs Trucking. And they'll be like, yep, that's, and they'll ask you for your name, they'll put that down. And when at the end of the month, your boss will get the bill. So all the times that his drivers have stayed in parking will come up on that invoice. So Snap take a bit off the top of it as their payment and that, but it just means that the driver doesn't have to worry about forking out for parking because we get it paid back as expenses, but that's a week or so of you being out of pocket. Whereas on
Okay.
Snap, you don't have to pay at all.
So you guys you're not, it's not coming out of your pocket then to park if you've got to park in one of those places.
I would never work for a firm that expects drivers to pay for parking. I'm not paying to park the boss's truck. No, thank you.
Yeah, because that was
So
my
what
first question. I went into a couple places and I asked them at the Hollies up there, and it was expensive, right? It was like 30 pounds or something like that.
a lot of the time you get a meal voucher. Same with Europe as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, they did
You'll
say
roll
that you
into.
get like a few, like 5 pounds for voucher or something like that, 6 pounds.
There are the big difference in like there's a lot more free parking in Europe, but particularly Germany. Germany, because it's where it's located, is a major transit because it sits right in the middle of Western and Eastern Europe. So it gets a lot of traffic. And the free parking, like if you're not in there by 3:30, 4 o'clock, you ain't getting in. And they will park every which way. And I've rolled into a service area, service station at night because you're running at night on the music. And I come round coming in a little bit hotter than I should have been. And next thing I know, I see these big white doors of a reefer fridge, and I have to stand on the brakes because I thought, oh, you're not supposed to be parked there. And they're all parking around the fuel pumps, bending them round corners, up the curbs, and everything. That's why everywhere in France has got like meter high curbs to stop drivers from doing it.
Hmm.
But yeah, parking like you will get in Europe your paid parking. They generally tend to be better. Like you'll get like a parking might be 30 euros, but you'll get like a 25 euro voucher for food, and it's almost like a flipping pub someplace, particularly in Germany. There's a really good one at Gieselwind actually, where I've stayed at before. It's essentially a pub that's got a big parking area for trucks and a fuel station.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a big debate here You know, a bunch of our truck stop chains have switched over to a lot of paid parking, and they've converted at least part of their lot to paid parking because there's a big parking shortage all over the country typically. I work my day job now is I work for one of the big truck stop chains in IT. And our truck stop chain has just always been of the mindset that we're never going to charge for parking. So we don't charge for parking, but then it fills up, right? I mean, it's just packed out, and you know, there's a lot of make your own parking spot. Some of it's like you said, it's dangerous. Some of the places that people do it, you know, is on the side of the road or on an off ramp to the freeway, and then they get issued citations, or you don't have any services. That's not any fun to spend 10 hours on the side of a freeway waiting for your to get hours back so you can go find a place to go to the bathroom properly or get food. That's one of the biggest challenges we have here, especially around big cities, is there's just nowhere near enough parking to support all the trucks that are required to bring everything they need.
It's a tale as old as time. Is they want the stuff that's on your truck, they just don't want you.
Right.
There's a big
Exactly.
argument over here from truckers. It's like these big developments for warehousing, because there's a lot going up, is that they should be providing an area for truck parking, because a lot of them are quote private land. So they'll give you a parking ticket for it's like 100, 200, like 120 quid, 125 quid or something like that, pounds, just
Hmm.
for parking on there overnight. And it's like, well, why don't you provide parking? Oh, that's not our problem. But you
It,
want
it is your
you want
problem.
the stuff,
Right.
you want the stuff that we carry, but you just don't want us. But it's just like everything. It's people on the road. It's like they don't want trucks on the road because we get in the way. We're
Yeah.
slow. We're big and heavy and everything else like that and whatnot. Yet, and I hate
You
to
keep
sound
buying
like
stuff,
this.
right? And you keep going on
Exactly.
Amazon and buying the stuff that make
Yeah,
means I gotta come here.
yeah, it's like, and I don't, because I know this sounds a bit like a broken record, but if we if we stopped, if every driver just literally went, I'm not going to work just 12 hours, just I'm not going to work for 12 hours, the supply chain would just fall over, and then people would suddenly realize just how vital trucking is. It's one of those ones that you'll never see it until it goes wrong. And
Yeah.
case in point, a little while ago, a couple of years ago, a news article was released about a potential driver shortage for fuel drivers, fuel tanker drivers. And that's turned into a month or so's panic buying of fuel. And that was manufactured. Like that was essentially fake. It was one depot in the south of the country, and it turned into a national panic buying session.
Yeah.
And like 6 o'clock in the morning, and they were queuing out of the car park at the supermarkets just for fuel.
Right.
And that was like, if every single driver just went, we're not doing anything, just 12 hours, not doing anything, that would be, that would look like child's play in comparison. But then everybody's out there going, oh, you guys have got easy jobs and this, that, and the other. You sit on your bum all day, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, just there's no consideration because they don't see what we do outside of driving. They don't
Well,
see. So go ahead.
it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because there was an article that I talked about on the podcast maybe 5, 6 weeks ago, because somebody had done some survey and just went out to non-truck driving adults and asked them questions about, would you become a truck driver? And it was like 65, 70% of them said, yeah, if the pay was right, if it was a little bit more than what I make now, I'd probably go do it. I got a great chuckle out of that. I was like, yes, this is by people who have no idea what it is that we actually go through on a daily basis. They don't realize how many hours we actually work and how aggravating it is, how physically demanding it can be, all the things. And like, yeah, there's no way 70% of you would get out and quit your job, sitting behind a desk somewhere, getting off at your scheduled time, you know, starting at your scheduled time, all the pain and agony and irritation that goes into truck driving. 70% of you wouldn't last through the training school to get your CDL.
I don't make, like, people ask me, well, what's it like being a truck driver and that? It's like, I make no bones about it. If this job isn't for everybody, particularly if you do nights away, what we call tramping over here, because back in the day, after a week, you come out of your truck looking like a tramp. So the name stuck. So if you want to do stuff like that, it is a lifestyle, not a job. And that requires a different mentality to it, because you will get up before, and you will be at work before people are even up. Like, you will drive through towns and you'll still see people with their curtains closed asleep.
Yeah.
You will finish work when those same people will be at home getting ready for bed. If you are prepared to do that and you are prepared to put up with the long hours, you'll do fine. The other thing is, how do you deal with stress? Because you've got the stress from the office hounding you. You've got the stress from other road users who don't know how to act around you. You've got the stress of people loading and unloading and everything else. If at the end of the day, and you can let all that go, you'll be fine as a truck driver. But if you can't and you hold on to it, you'll just end up with a heart attack.
Yeah. It'll burn
Because
you out.
this job, it is quote unquote easy in inverted commas, but it can be incredibly stressful. And that's what people miss. They see the fact that we're sat behind the steering wheel. And to drive a truck in a straight line is relatively simple. It's the other stuff that you have to contend with. That's what makes this job stressful and hard. The unloading procedures, the backing up, the strapping down of loads, the paperwork. If you're doing international, you've got customs and everything else as well to deal with. You've got law enforcement, you've got the driver rules enforcement, and you've got traffic and people cutting in front of you and everything because they don't want to be behind a truck and that. And that's where this job sucks. But
Yeah.
some days where everything goes well, the music on the radio is great, the weather is nice, the places that you go to, oh yeah, just bang it over there, drive, get your curtains open, and we'll have it off. Everything just falls into place. It's the best job in the world.
It
It
is.
really is the best job in the world. But when things start going wrong, oh, they go wrong in a big way.
Yeah.
But I won't
Well,
make any bones about, like, because I've had people like forklift drivers, they say, oh, what's it like being a lorry driver? I'll tell them, like, I'll tell them the truth, because I don't want to sell people on a lie. You will have days where this job is great. You will have days where you just want to chuck it
yeah.
because just it's just everything's just falling apart. But if you can handle that and you can handle everything else, you'll do fine as a truck driver. If you don't want a social life.
Yeah, that's for sure. It wreaks havoc on your life too, your relationships, all kinds of stuff.
There are people that I know that can make it work and they have made it work, but has to be committed from both sides. And the other thing that turns a lot of people off from truck driving is a lot of companies will require 2 years experience. So you've got these people that they paid their money to pass their tests, their HGV or their CDLs and that.
Yeah.
Then they go to a company and go, I'm a brand new pass. I want to come and work for you. Sorry, mate, can't employ you. You've got to have 2 years experience. And they keep going from company to company to company to company, and they get told the same thing one after the other. Can't take you on. You don't have the experience. How can I get experience if you won't give me a job? So they end up out these 2-bit cowboy outfits who don't run legally, and then ask the drivers to do insane things because they're new, they don't know any better. And
Yeah.
they go, I'm being worked like a dog for very little money. Sod this, I'm off. So
Right.
that's another one crashed out. And like, how are you going to replace an aging workforce? Because you guys have got the same problem that we have over here. Our truck drivers, the average age is like 55, 60-ish now.
Yeah.
There's very little young blood coming into the industry to replace those drivers. And then these companies are going, oh, we've got driver shortage and that. And then you've got people going, oh, I've passed my test and that. Oh, sorry, we can't take you. You haven't got experience. I understand that it's a risk. And I am not immune. When I first passed my test, I did have a few bumps and scrapes and that. We all do. Like these companies need to realize that sometimes you just have to swallow the cost of the insurance increase just to get these guys through the door. And because they're fresh, they're green, they're new, they're moldable.
Yes.
You'd much
Teach them
rather
properly.
employ, yes, much rather employ someone who's new, who doesn't know any of the bad habits, and you can teach them how to do things your company's way. A lot of the companies over here, particularly the big, what you call mega carriers, the big ones, your DHLs, your FedExes, people like big companies like that, they are very regimented. They're very strict on health and safety. They have a lot of people who have done the theory and that, but haven't actually been out there in the real world.
Hmm.
But because they've put the rules down, they're the ones you have to follow. Someone who's been doing the job 15 years is unlikely to adjust, not impossible, but unlikely to adjust to a regimented system. You have to do things the DHL way. Otherwise, they get rid of you. Some
Yeah.
drivers can. I've met plenty of drivers who used to be down the road, but now they do just local stuff. They're home every night because they can switch off. They can just go, okay. They just treat it as a job again. It's like, right, come in, get my keys because I don't get an assigned truck. I just whatever truck's available, get my job for the day. I go and do that. I come back, put fuel in the truck, and go home again. They can do that, but there are some drivers who can't, and they're the ones that don't like working for these big companies. They go crying to the government about, oh, we haven't got any drivers. Fix the problem that
Yeah.
they created.
Which is everybody wants experience. Nobody wants to be the one to provide the experience except for a few mega carriers. And we have to figure out what we're going to do about this problem because a large population of our truck drivers are aging out of the work and they're just not going to be around.
The other thing about why we can't get drivers is that because the way the insurance has changed, and that's the whole range of factors as well with changing like modern times and that. But a lot of firms, particularly the big ones, they won't let you take passengers, particularly children. So the ones that the drivers with kids, that they can't take their kids out, they can't get their kids interested in the job
Yeah.
because like there are some that still do. Some of the smaller firms and that still I do see on occasion. I do see drivers and that, and they've got a young kid with them. It's obviously their daughter or their son in the truck with them and that. And you do see some that are completely truck mad and they will come into trucking because it's what they want to do. But the everyday bod, quote unquote, he's not gonna he's not unless he's forced into the industry, which I have spoken to people and they have been like they've been unemployed, for example, and the job center, as part of getting them back into work, they will actually pay, the government will pay for them to get their lorry license. And it it's a very polarizing subject, the driver shortage over here, because you'll get drivers that will they'll point the finger at the foreign chaps that have come in
Yeah.
and they go, oh, it's their fault that the wages are suppressed. And other people will turn around and say, because I say is that it's not their fault that they're working in the same industry as us. It's the people paying us that have decided that they're not going to increase the wages. They're the
Yeah.
people at fault. But when you start going down that road, and that tends to invoke some potentially heated conversations, depending on who you're talking to,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
definitely. It's really at the forefront of the conversation here right now with who's been let into the United States on what visas and which CDLs are being honored from other countries. We've had a lot of fatality accidents that have happened with drivers who are here on a visa who may or may not be able to speak English. You know, you got drivers crashing into things and troopers at the scene of the accident going, "Can you read that sign right there that says slow down due to the snow or weather conditions?" And the person can't read the sign. And so, I mean, it's just been a very, to your point, a very heated topic about who's being let in to drive, how do they get in, and is this safe? Also, the kind of the financial pressure to keep the prices down on transportation costs, and also that there's an ongoing driver shortage that seems to have a cliff coming with an aging driver population.
I think a lot of it, you place the blame at certain companies, not everyone, but a lot of the bigger companies, because they don't want to pay because they've cut everything else to the bone to try and get the work. Then they cut the wages. And then that's when they go, they can't get native drivers. So they'll go, okay, we'll go to another country and bring them in. And when our minimum wage in this country is potentially 2 or 3 times the minimum wage of another country. So if I was a citizen of, let's say, country 2, and country 1 had 3 times the minimum wage, I would go and work in country 1 because I can get 3 times the salary that I would do at home. So I don't blame them for that at all. Don't blame them at all. So I place the blame at the feet of the companies who turn around and go, "Oh, we're not increasing wages this year." Like, or we don't think that like you guys are worth paying for because we can bring in 2 or 3 people from another country, which I think isn't right. It's not the guys that they're bringing in's fault. It's the people that are sitting at the table, the stockholders and shareholders and everything else. They're the ones to blame for all this. The people who want infinite growth in a finite world. But
Yes.
then that's dangerously close to political talk. And that
Yeah.
can be very polarizing for people. I've seen plenty of folk complaining, rightfully so, about how the wages haven't increased. Cost of living's gone up, but the wages haven't gone up to match.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, you've got drivers coming in who don't speak the lingo. And there was it one in Texas?
Yeah, the one in Austin, Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, that he drove into the back of, was it stationary traffic?
Yeah, traffic was parked and I don't know, he hit like 12, 14 cars or something and
Yeah, and
multiple fatalities.
yeah, I saw there was a video of the guy, and the guy's just stood there. Like, part of it's shock probably,
Yeah.
but he doesn't know where he is, and that, and then obviously all the comments underneath about like, oh, it's like he's a one of these drivers, and if these guys are coming in and they're not being held to the same standard as, say, you or I, like that is wrong because it was a big problem over here for a while because the licensing for certain countries was a lot easier. So they didn't have as much training as experience and roadcraft as a native driver would. And they were still being allowed behind the wheel.
Yeah.
And I think that is obviously going to cause rifts even more. But then you've got people like there's so many accidents that are avoidable accidents that are coming from drivers who might not be native. I'm trying to pick my words carefully here, but at the end of the day, it is all having a negative effect on our image
Correct.
because I've seen videos of drivers all over the world, and particularly in Europe and America and that, and they do silly, inconsiderate things. I know you guys have a big problem because some of you guys are limited, some of you guys aren't. You'll get 2 guys that'll be like 0.1 of a mile an hour quicker than the other, but one of them's heavier,
Yeah.
one of them's not. So every time they go up a hill, they basically reset, and it's mile after mile after mile after mile after mile, and it just enrages people. And that's another issue that we've got as an image problem. They don't want us because we leave the place a mess. We cause problems on the road when you've got drivers who won't give in I won't just go, I'll just knock it off a click. This guy's clearly quicker than me, but I won't take it off cruise control. I'll just sit there and cause problems. And then you've got drivers who are aggressive, but same time, we're professional drivers held to a
Yeah.
higher standard and all that.
Well, I think you hit on a really important point, and especially in this day and age with recording devices everywhere and then social media to amplify things, and just human nature being that the negative things will get amplified much faster and much larger and more quickly than any good thing does. It really does have an impact overall on our image, and the bad things are getting out. What doesn't get talked about is all the millions of miles that got driven today where nothing bad happened and it was exceptionally well done. And we're talking about and seeing, and people who aren't in the business just see the bad things. Well,
But
Matt, I don't want to keep you up all night over there in the UK, but it's been amazing to meet you, and awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed all of it. I can't thank you enough for the time that you donated here today.
I've had a good time. It's like I enjoy talking about this, and as I say, like I do enjoy the job. I do enjoy doing it, and when everything does go right, it really is the best job in the world. I don't have to put up with office politics a lot of the time. It's just me, my music, or somebody on the end of the phone. I could be on the phone to a friend of mine for hours. You couldn't do that in an office.
Well, the other thing too, I didn't know what it would be like. I mean, I've met some other drivers from around the world when I was younger, Australians mostly, but just me going up to the Hollies and sitting down in the diner and just starting up conversations with truck drivers. I don't know if other people could do that in any other industry, right? And I met a father and son there who were just amazing, and we sat there for, I don't know, an hour talking as if we were long lost friends. The people who are in this business, who actually love this business and couldn't imagine doing something else because we enjoy it, for the days like that, and in spite of the other days where it doesn't go nearly as well. And maybe that's part of what makes the good days feel so amazing is, it's not every day. Um, but just being able to share that with strangers, this conversation that you and I are having, to me, that's something special about this business too.
Of all the negative stuff that's connected to this business, at the end of the day, we are drivers. We are brothers and sisters, really. Like we should be looking out for each other. We should be able to help each other and that. And I've been to places and I've been struggling. And some guy, I've never met him before. And he'll come over and just start helping. Just
Yeah,
because we're just fellow drivers. And like you're trying to back into a space in a truck stop and it's tight and you're like the last space and it's a pain and somebody will jump out of the truck and they'll give you a hand and that. And it's nice when they do. Not everyone does it, but it's nice when they do because we're all doing the same job. So if it makes a little bit easier to help somebody, because I've had it, like somebody helped me and I make sure to pass it forward, whether it's advice, like somebody's given me advice when I first started driving. I give advice to new drivers. Now I remember it was a chap I was delivering to a cash and what is it like a cash and carry, which is a sort of supermarket for small independent shop owners rather than just retail,
right.
sort of general public and that. And he'd only been driving a couple of weeks. He was doing what they call multi-drop. So his trailer, he had a huge gaps between pallets. So I showed him how to bring the internal straps forward and how to strap it. So if you have to hit the brakes, someone pulled out in front of you, those pallets aren't going to go forward because he's not seen that. Nobody up until that point has taken the time to tell him. Somebody, when I first started, reached out and helped me. So it's my turn to reach out and help someone new. And I think if more drivers did that, then maybe this industry wouldn't have such a negative image.
Amen to that. That's where the brotherhood and the sisterhood of this business still lives. It's up to us to do it. We have to do it for others.
There is a little bit of a selfish reason for sometimes helping drivers in is because I don't want them to hit my truck.
There's a self-preservation motive sometimes that comes into play too, that's for sure. I'd rather meet you by helping you than filling out an insurance claim form with you.
Yeah, there is that. But it's, as I said to a young driver, he was fretting because he was backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. He couldn't get it straight and that. And I just turned around and said to him, don't worry. Points don't mean prizes in this game. If it takes you 20 minutes, it takes you 20 minutes. But
Yeah.
we don't hit anything and we've done it fine. Because my first time that I had to put it on a dock or a bay, and that's my first time of ever properly reversing a truck. Took me 17, 18 attempts to get it straight. And there are even days now where what would be an easy reverse, and I still make a mess of things.
Yeah.
So like, there's no shame in, like I said to this kid, is like, there's no shame in like not getting it first time, because you will learn, and that's how we all did it. And don't listen to Johnny Super Trucker over there. I did it in one go and this, that, and the other, because the next reverse he'll go to and he'll make an absolute pig's ear of it.
Yeah.
As
for
long as you
sure.
don't hit anything, then you've 99% of the work is already done.
100% agree. Well, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate meeting you.
It's been a pleasure.
We're talking trucking life, uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories, and the miles in between. From first jobs to last hauls, the laughs that kept us going, and the lessons that left a mark.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Matt. Fantastic conversation. We talked for about 3 hours. It was great. Great fun sharing photos. I'll share those photos out on Facebook with everybody. He shared a bunch of the trucks from that he's driven, the company that he works for. Really cool stuff. It was just great that Matt reached out and I had a chance to spend a few hours talking to him. Quick reminder to pay a visit to our friends of the show on social media. Truckers Wealth, Mike Barber over there, Mike Ritzema over at Superior Trucking Payroll Service. Nailed it. We've got the Feathersons, of course, Tierra and Greg on their various social media platforms. I-95 Truckers. Al's going to be out snapping photos on I-95 here Monday. So check out his Facebook page, see when and where he's going to be out there. Maybe you can get your picture taken by Al. Big Cal's Truck and Kitchen. Cal is a machine. He is a content making machine. For all the miles that guy puts on and all the content he puts out, he sets the bar, sharing his passions, his kind spirit with everybody. Thank you for all the content out there and appreciate also your friendship as well. MJ Love Johnson, been posting out here recently. Cindy in Iraq, Chris Barber, he's been posting quite a bit. They got an interesting ostrich dilemma up in Canada. If you haven't seen what that's all about, quite a goofy scenario. And they got a little bit of positive news. I won't be a spoiler, but they got a little bit of positive news at the end of last week. But as with anything, it seems up in the Canadian government, like it's not over until it's over. So check out some of his pages. He's been sharing a lot of that content as well as they continue the ongoing battle with ridiculous government situations up in Canada. Next week, I'm going to be taking a trip up to Minnesota. So we'll be doing a couple of episodes from the Great White North. Hopefully, it's not all that white, but they are getting snow. Not in the Twin Cities, thank God. But up north, I saw some relatives who live further north posting pictures of snow. And then up in Ontario and other parts of Canada, like they're getting pounded. So hopefully, I don't experience any of that. That's why I moved to Arizona. But we get to babysit the grandbaby and attend a graduation, see a bunch of family and friends, and get to test some of my live interview equipment that I purchased. So see if that works. Be prepared for technical difficulties. Quick update on the encouragement cards. I haven't been pushing those as hard lately, mainly because I don't know what happened over at the printer, but I still haven't got my first batch. Now, finally, I did get a tracking number, so they should be here, and I should have them in my hands before I leave for Minnesota, so I can actually ship out the orders that y'all have placed. So we're back in business, folks. Get your orders in. Head over to the website, channel19experience.com. It's right there on the main page. Scroll down a little bit underneath the podcast platforms. You'll see the button for the encouragement card for order form. It's pretty simple. Just go and click a couple buttons, put your name and address. We'll ship them out to you. You'll be on your way. Summer truck show season is in full swing. with events going on pretty much somewhere every weekend across the country. I think Mara posted a link on the Facebook page. I'll go and repost it. There's a website, thetruckshowlist.com. It's fantastic. It's got them all in there. They got maps, they've got lists. However you want to look up where and when there's a truck show in this great land of ours, you can find it on there. You know, we've got the large cars and guitars coming up in 1 week down in Bristol, Tennessee. We've got the American Trucking Historical Society, and that one's going on shortly thereafter. We've got the Walcott Truckers Jamboree going on in July. We've got the South Idaho Truck Show. There's trucks everywhere, folks, and people showing them off, showing off their goods, having a good time. Get out there, find a place, plug into the community. We'll be out there at a few of them as well. We've got the Semi Truck Stampede, which I really want to see, these uphill Quebec drag races. There's one coming up in the summer, and then there's one later in September out by Cleveland. And they got truck parking, so you can get there, folks, if you're in the neighborhood. But anyway, ton of stuff to do. Get out, enjoy our culture of trucking, and bring your families out there. Be sure to keep reaching out. If you'd like to be on the program, share your opinion, message us on social media, email us at inbox@channel19experience.com. There's also a contact form on the website. Keep sharing the program with your friends. And also, amazing job, everybody, encouraging one another. Like every time I go on some of our friends' pages, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on TikTok, when I see Danger Dave posting a picture of his meal that he prepared in the truck over on Big Cal's Truck and Kitchen page, like, I mean, that just makes my heart smile to see engagement with one another and sharing our successes and our happiness with one another. So great job doing that. I know a lot of you do it. It really makes, to me, all of this worthwhile. So in closing, like, follow, subscribe, heart, put in a good word, send in a lovely comment. Tell us what you think of the show. Thanks for listening. See y'all next week. We've got work to do.
This has been the Channel 19 Experience. If it's about trucking, we're talking about it. All uncut. The wild stuff, the weird stuff, the mistakes, the memories. But we talk about the world of trucking today, too. Everything from legislation to lane changes in the industry. We got it covered. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back at the ranch soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media at Channel 19 Experience and the website at www.channel19experience.com. That's channel and the numbers 19. See you down the road.